Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session, hosted and set up by Pre-Law Shadowers. I'm Reshma, and I'll be the coordinator for today's session. Today, I'll be talking to the lawyer Tamaira Davidson about her career and path into law. To begin with, I'll just introduce myself, tell you a little bit about Pre-Law Shadowers, and hand it off to Tamaira so she can tell us a little bit about herself. As I've mentioned, my name is Reshma Acer, and I'm a fourth-year student at U of T. I'm currently studying for the LSAT and plan on taking it sometime the next year before hopefully applying to law school. That said, I'm really interested in the legal field and hearing about others' journeys into law school and into working in law, so I'm really excited to host today's session. I'm an exec member of Pre-Law Shadowers who set up today's meeting. Pre-Law Shadowers is a student-led organization dedicated to providing pre-law students across universities in Ontario with virtual shadowing opportunities. Our goal is to help young students engage and learn more about the legal careers they plan to pursue. It can be difficult to find learning opportunities, especially after the pandemic. So we started this organization in the hopes that it can be both accessible and educationally fulfilling for students. Today, I'll be talking to Tamaira, an associate at the firm Hicks and Adams. She started off her career with an undergraduate degree from U of Guelph, where she studied applied science. She also received a diploma in community and justice services from Humber College, and following this, graduated from the Bora-Laskin Faculty of Law in 2020 with a JD. She has worked at various legal clinics and has done work with Innocence Canada along with Pro Bono Students Canada, and has been before the OCJ and the Superior Court of Justice. We're really excited to have her here with us today so she can tell us more about her experience and her path into the legal field. So welcome, Tamaira. You can go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into questions.
Thank you so much for inviting me first off. I really appreciate it. So I practice criminal defense solely. I'm at Hicks Adams, and that is the area that we focus on. So we appear before all levels of court. And that's been something that I've always been interested in from before my undergrad, really. So I have always had an interest in just advocating, especially for people that are of marginalized communities or just disadvantaged people. And that's always been a passion of mine, and I love advocacy. So I've always been interested in it. I'm just a couple years into my career so far, but I've been fortunate enough to gain a lot of different experiences with different legal clinics and as well as different firms. So that's pretty much a little bit of background about me. I've kind of been somebody that's always been interested in law. I always knew the field that I wanted to go into, and now I'm in it. So I'm happy to be doing that, and I'm really happy to be able to communicate with fellow future colleagues as well as students that are interested in going into a similar path or just even with any area of law. Oh, I think you're just muted.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. So I'll jump into the first question, which is what programs and courses did you study in your undergraduate program, and why did you pick what you chose to study before going into law school?
So I did a lot of my course essentially branched off into individuals that wanted to go into either policing or community justice services. I went into that route. So my courses, there wasn't a lot of electives, but the ones that I did choose were more advocacy based. So I took a moot course because it's really hard, just an FYI, it's really hard to get some practical experience in law school because it's hard for people to take a chance on you, and you're not just going to get a file that you can go run a trial on or really even do any court appearances and things like that while in law school. So I really wanted to try to get comfortable with that because that for the field that I was interested in and still am interested in criminal law, there's a lot of advocacy to that. Not true for all areas. In like civil law, there's almost no verbal advocacy. Like it's very rare to have trials, but in the field that I chose, I really wanted to choose my courses based upon building those advocacy skills and getting comfortable with talking in front of large groups and things like that. So I did a moot course, and a lot of the courses that I chose to take were much more based on assisting some of like the marginalized communities and things like that that I had an interest in. So I took courses like Canadian social issues and things in that nature that would kind of help me understand the clientele that I was going to be dealing with, as well as just trying to polish my skills. Even we had a co-op in my program, and I wanted to work at a criminal firm just to kind of dip my toes into what I would be expecting. So I think it's really important when you're choosing your courses to try to have some kind of vision of what area you want to go into. Now that can change, and a lot of times people come into law school and they think that they're interested in a specific type of law, and then they aren't sure. So you can kind of go both ways. If you're very certain with what you want to get into, then choose courses for that. Or if you're uncertain, branch off and see if other areas are of interest to you, so you don't kind of just narrow in on one specific type of field.
Thank you for that response. How was the LSAT and law school admission process like for you? Do you have any advice for students currently taking the LSAT or applying right now?
So very stressful. I hated taking the LSAT and studying for it. I'm glad I never have to do it again. I took a course which I thought was really beneficial. It was one called Harvard Ready. And that course I like because even if you didn't do well on the LSAT or you want to take the course over again, they have that option, which, going into it, you never know what you're going to score on the LSAT. So luckily I didn't have to do that. But I'm somebody that likes to learn from a professor. I like to ask questions. It's harder for me to just kind of read from a textbook. So prepping for the LSAT was definitely difficult, and getting out of the frame of mind that we're so used to, and the different types of answering questions or how you learn things in undergrad is very different than how you're supposed to do things on the LSAT, just in terms of your thinking and being so technical and almost annoying to a certain extent. But you should come out of the LSAT kind of being a bit more annoying to your friends when they make statements that are a little bit more general, and you're like, well, not technically. That's kind of the frame of mind that you want to be in post LSAT, because you think differently, and maybe you'll build a skill down the line to just not say any comment that comes to your mind. But those comments and those kind of buzzwords that make you want to always say, well, technically, or well, it's not necessarily true that X. So that process was definitely difficult. You have to study tremendously, not as much as the bar. So, get used to writing tests, and, the bar is much more difficult. So just get ready for that. And then in terms of personal statements and reference letters, reach out to your profs. It's really good to, while you're in your undergrad, get to know your professors and make sure that they know who you are, because they're the ones that are going to be providing you with the reference letters. And if you're just, another number in their class, they're going to give you something a little bit more generic. Also, it's really common, I found, for professors to ask you to write your own reference letters, and then they'll sign off on it, which is kind of frustrating, because it puts you in an awkward situation, because you don't want to talk about how great you are, where your professor might do that. But so you kind of just dim your own light because you don't want to go over the top. But it's something that's very common. They're very busy. And, when they're being approached by 10 different students to write reference letters, anticipate some of them might ask you to do that. They might just read over it. And in terms of personal statements, get people to review those for you. I use Grammarly still. If anyone knows what that is, you can just Google it. But, get different people to review your statements, see if it makes sense. Get a variety of, colleagues, friends, family to look over this and make sure it makes sense. Also look at what the school is looking for. Some law schools will ask you to, they'll say they're looking for applicants that can demonstrate these 3 categories. Make sure you have those 3 categories in your personal statements. Some of them will take more of a holistic approach. So just make sure that you're actually looking at what the law school is looking for, and then catering and contouring your application to that.
So I did mention this in your introduction, but if you want to go a little bit more into detail about which law school you graduated from and what your experience was like there, what made you choose the law school you chose?
Yeah, so I went to Boralaskan Faculty of Law. It's in Thunder Bay. It's Northern Ontario. And I chose that school for kind of the same reasons that I indicated, just having that practical experience. So when I went there, it was a newer program. But so there's a couple of good things. I guess I'll just do a pitch for my law school really quickly. But graduates from there actually don't have to article. So you save a year of your life, which I really liked. And then you also have a practical component in each one of your courses, which was also beneficial to someone like me that wants to get comfortable with advocacy. So in most law schools, your exam is like 80%, or your exam is like 80% of your mark or 90% of your mark, and that's all written. And then, I don't know, however they break down the rest of it, but there's not really that practical component that I really enjoy. And because every single course that you take at Royal Alaskan requires you to do some kind of practical, whether it's advocacy or an assignment, that's why you don't need to article at the end of it, because the assumption is you essentially do the articling throughout the 3 years that you're there. And then in the final year, you do what's called a placement. So my experience was wonderful. For my placement, I actually interned at another criminal defense firm in downtown Toronto. I had a great experience. I got to shadow Sean Robichaud, who does a lot of various types of criminal cases. And I got to shadow him as a student, which was great. And you don't really get that in law school because everything is so theoretical. So even in my business course, which I had to take, there was a lot more mandatory courses. We had to incorporate a business. Or for my criminal course in 1L, that's your first year of law school, I had to, draft bail submissions and then present those to my professors as well as local lawyers, and then get critiqued on that. And that really helped me because then in my first year as like an associate, when I had to actually run my own bail hearing, I had a little bit more comfort in terms of knowing what I would have to say. Same thing for sentencing submissions. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the practical elements that I got from doing my law school at Royal Alaskan.
Thank you for that answer. Were there any courses, professors, or school clubs that stood out to you during your time in law school?
Yes. So once again, I did a lot of moots. I love doing moots because essentially it's kind of like a presentation. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So in law school, I did 2 moots. One of which was I'm forgetting it now, but the Arnott Cup, I believe it was, and then it's the Sapinka Cup if you make it, like if you're like the best school in Ontario or something like that. Then you go to the Sapinka Cup, and then you verse other law schools in Canada. So I was really fortunate that I got to do a moot, which was really great. And once again, that just kind of went towards my goals of becoming comfortable as an advocate and kind of polishing those skills and just continuing to do so. I also took another course, I think it was advanced criminal law, or maybe it was criminal law advocacy, one of the two, where I had to do a presentation pretty much once every 2 weeks, or not necessarily a presentation, sorry, but an assignment that was, filling out a Form 1, which many of you might not know, but most things in criminal cases, if you want to bring a charter application or whatever application it might be, that's the route that you would go. So just kind of drafting those documents was really beneficial. And getting used to doing that, because once I did enter into the real world and once I was an associate, I had that experience.
At what point in your life did you decide you wanted to pursue a legal career, and who or what would you say were your biggest influences in this regard?
Sorry, can you just say that? I think my internet glitched out.
Yes. At what point in life did you decide you wanted to pursue a legal career, and who or what would you say were your biggest influences in this regard?
So I would say I've always been somebody that, I think that a lot of people might be able to identify this, but as you're, a teenager or when you're younger, your parents always say you love to argue, right? And then you're like, great, I'll be a lawyer. So I was similar in that regard. And I guess I've always, understood or tried to understand the privilege that I have and some of the disadvantages that other people have. And I've always felt extremely passionate about that. And that's kind of something that's always drawn me towards criminal law specifically. I wasn't really someone that was hesitant in terms of what area I wanted to go into. I always knew I wanted to advocate for others who were disadvantaged, and people that were taken advantage of by the system. So I think just very early on, I've always been somebody that wanted to understand, why the rules were the way that they were. And then that kind of expanded beyond myself when I want to, advocate for others and make sure that other people aren't taken advantage of. So I've pretty much known that since elementary school. I know that a lot of people are in that case, but I know a lot of people aren't, and they kind of make a change down the line.
You briefly covered this, but what was the process of getting into your current field? Did you try anything else, or did you know for sure it was criminal?
Yeah, so like I said, I always kind of knew. There was a point where, I thought that maybe I might go into family law, but I really didn't care about, divorce. I didn't want to deal with parents arguing and just, all of the petty stuff. But I was really interested in, advocating for children possibly. And I know that there's the Office of the Children's Lawyer, which is like a branch of the government that deals with that. But it was more of an interest, but I knew that my passion was always in criminal. So that's why I pursued that more so. And then the process for me was just applying and putting myself out there. And luckily, because of my program, I was able to do a placement, like I said, and then I was able to shadow a lawyer downtown that I respected, and learn from him, and got to, see a 12-week jury trial as well as like a shorter 2 or 3 day trial. So, and the way that I actually got that position was just by cold emailing, and I, Googled, top 10 firms in Toronto or something like that. And I was like, okay, let me email all the partners and be like, hey, student will work for free. Please give me a job. And that worked. And it was amazing. Like there was great experiences I had there. And now in my career, I can kind of reflect on some of those experiences and be like, oh, I've actually gone through this, or I've observed somebody else go through this. So the process for me was, applying for jobs and reaching out. I think that, I don't know what it's like post-COVID, but it's really hard, regardless, to reach out to peers, especially if you don't know who they are, but it's so beneficial. I recently actually reached out to a professor from my undergrad that dealt with youth offender matters because I had an issue come up with one of my cases. And I just shot him an email out of the blue, even though I haven't spoken to him in like 6 years. And I don't know if he really remembers me at all, but just making those connections. And the worst thing that people can say is no. So I think that's something that put me in the situation that I'm in right now. And, just applying and trying to make those connections. And even the current job that I have, I reached out to one of the lawyers at the firm before my interview to let them know, hey, like, I'm interested in this. I'm going to apply. There's a lot of rules about applying for jobs when you're in law school, but I wasn't in violation of any of those. But I reached out to her and we spoke for like an hour, just kind of to understand what their firm offered and things like that.
Do you have any dislikes about your current field, and what are your biggest likes about your current field?
Okay, so my dislikes, every job has its stressors. But I would say that one of the more difficult things of my career is the clients, definitely so. I love the clients as a whole, and I really enjoy getting to assist. That being said, not all of them, but some are very high needs, and you need a high tolerance for a lot of situations, as well as a lot of people. You need people skills in my field. The job is much harder without those people skills. And you really have to, turn the other cheek in so many situations. Like even as a student, just dealing with people that are recently arrested, a lot of times they might be, not even coming down off of drugs. They may have recently taken drugs and they're swearing at you when they're getting frustrated, or, they're doing, whether it's offensive things or just, they're all over the place, and not internalizing, having to learn not to internalize that or let it ruin your day and take offense to it is really difficult. But how I cope with that is just getting the bigger picture. Like, this person is struggling with severe mental health issues, and yes, they really pissed me off. And, yes, they're disrespectful, but not taking things personally. But, at the same time, building boundaries. That is one of the most important things that I tell anybody that, I interview at my firm, in terms of students that we're looking for, and that you need, because our clients are tough. And if you don't build those boundaries, then they're going to, not all of them, but sometimes, like, they will take advantage. And at the end of the day, they've had really tough lives. At the end of the day, we're dealing with people that are homeless, or that struggle with addiction, or that struggle with their mental health. So that's one of the more difficult aspects of my field. But it's also, at the same time, one of the things that drew me to this field, helping those people when everyone else is so frustrated by them, or no one else will, give them a second chance. And in terms of, I think you asked me about one of, like, the things that I enjoy about my favorite part. I love, like I said, advocacy. That's what I will continue to say. I love trials. I love prepping for them. I love cross-examining officers. That is the best part. I love, I was looking through officers' notes a couple of days ago, because we're doing what's called pre-trial motions. So essentially, we're saying that this officer violated our client's right to counsel, and that they didn't, offer my client, they offered him one meal within, like, a 15-hour time span. And it's exciting because I'm looking through these notes and I find this chart of when exactly my client was fed. And then, that's essentially evidence. And I'm getting excited because I'm about to cross-examine this officer about this contentious issue. Like, okay, you took, a statement from my client afterwards that turned out to be 4 hours. After he was already in your custody for 15 hours, you gave him one meal. Like, that would essentially contribute to, I'm not going to get too deep into the law. I'm kind of deep diving now. But what I'm trying to say is, one of the things that I really enjoy is the actual trial process, and cross-examining officers and holding them accountable for their mistakes. That being said, I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of Crowns that might be listening to this. So, no offense, but that's one of the things that I really enjoy. I love that. I love challenging the case that the Crown has against my client, and making sure justice is done. That's what my job is.
What does a typical day in your career look like in terms of responsibilities and tasks?
So very, very stressful. And I'm sure it's like this for all lawyers, but essentially you start your day with like an idea of what you would like to get done. And you never check those boxes off. That's pretty much what happens every single day. It could be like 3 things on your list, 10 things every single day. It's so hard to finish them, and you rarely do because so many things pop up. And it's like that with a lot of different fields, but I'll just speak about mine. I don't know, who's going to commit a crime the night before. So what happens is, I have my list of things that I'm supposed to do today. Then I get a call that someone was arrested and they need, like, a bail hearing that day. So you pretty much have a list of what you're trying to accomplish, and you just try your best to get some of those things off the list little by little, and the list will continue to grow kind of faster than you can keep up with it. But that's essentially what it is. So, for example, today I had a deadline to draft a factum, which is a large legal document and an argument. So it's finally done. I still have to complete that tonight. So my workday is not complete that. I still have to submit that tonight. So my workday still isn't done. But then there's also new lawyers that I'm assisting with. They have a bail hearing tomorrow. So thankfully, I'm not the one that has to run the bail hearing because it's very minor and I don't really care to do it. But then it's also important to kind of help newer lawyers understand what the procedure is. So once again, my day is not done. After this, I'll probably have a call with that lawyer about, this is what you can expect, this is what you're going to say, and things like that. But aside from, doing pleas, having meetings, like negotiating meetings in terms of a Crown pretrial or a judicial pretrial, which are both different types of meetings that you have to move cases along. That's pretty much what my day is. And then a lot of, not a crazy amount of reading, but a lot of researching and drafting. That's pretty much a day in the life.
What does a typical client at your firm look like, and how do the services they require from you differ? Additionally, what kind of cases do you most commonly have?
So I'd say a client at my firm, and they range, but most of my clients, we do a lot of legal aid at my firm. So legal aid clients, they typically can't afford a legal defense. So many times they're on OW. They are difficult to sometimes get a hold of because they're transient, so they don't have a cell phone. Like I have clients that are like that, or they're kind of all over the place, and it's kind of hard to remind them to come to court. Some of my clients are severe drug users, and I'll talk to them, and then the next day they'll call me back and they'll be like, "Oh, what were you saying?" I'm like, "I just explained this to you. What are you talking about?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I was drunk." And I'm like, "You're in jail. Like, why are you drunk?" But you kind of get used to these things. And then you have some clients that, there's a couple of them that are private clients. So that typically, I won't get too deep into the types of charges, but those offenses sometimes might look like drug trafficking charges, where, on paper still they might still qualify for legal aid because you don't get an invoice or a pay stub from drug dealing, but so they might still pay like a private retainer. So I would say that most of my clients come from some kind of adversity, and they look like any and everyone. Everyone at the end of the day knows somebody, whether, we might presume that, no, I don't hang out with criminals, but I guarantee you, by the time you're done law school, you will know at least one person that's gotten a DUI, and that results in a criminal record as well. So they really do look like any and everyone.
What is a common misconception about lawyers that you hear about the most?
That, I'll do criminal defense lawyers, at least, like that we all make a lot of money. That is not true. Like, I guess in the grand scheme of things, people think that, lawyers are very prestigious, but it's a lot of work. And I don't think that people realize exactly how much work it is. It's not all suits and, just fun. A lot of times it's work and quick deadlines and dealing with difficult situations. But I think, people just see the positives of it, and they don't see a lot of the downside of it and the difficulty. And you kind of have to come to terms with that. And I don't know about other fields, I'm not sure about what it's like for corporate or civil or things like that. But I just know that criminal, and I'll say family, I don't know much about family, but I could not do family law. I think that would be, if anything, would be more stressful just in terms of what you have to deal with. But it's much harder than you would think, on your personal life and how much time you have to allocate towards it. But that being said, it's also what you make it. So when you build up those boundaries, if you're at a place where you can do that, and only work 9 to 5. Most lawyers that I know don't work 9 to 5. Like, people are on their phone constantly, and they have to be accessible constantly.
What advice would you give to your younger self prior to attending law school?
I would say reputation matters. I think that a lot of people don't understand that, especially in a day and age where social media is so important. And it's so pivotal, right? Like, we can use that as a marketing tool, but people that went to law school like 15 years ago, they probably didn't have those same issues. And that was, nothing that really impacted me personally, but I can just see how, important it is to be mindful of, what you post on, I guess Facebook isn't a thing as much, but what you post on social media. Make sure that if somebody reads that, that's not going to be an issue, especially if, you're planning to go in government or something like that. Like those things are important because you're not representing yourself. You have to represent to some certain extent, the government and things like that. So I would I would definitely tell my younger self that reputation is important. And from the second that you start law school, you should really be mindful about people's perception of you, because that could be something that's influencing the jobs you get down the line, right? When you might start in one city and then decide you want to go to another location and reach out to somebody that you knew from law school because you want to switch fields or whatever it may be. But if you possibly have a bad reputation, they might not want to work with you or assist you with certain job prospects.
What advice would you give to the next generation of aspiring legal professionals?
That's a good one. Um, I would say be proactive with your work, and just also try to get into a good habit in terms of, meeting deadlines, but also making sure that you take time for yourself. Mental health is very important. Your mental health can quickly deteriorate in this field if you do not prioritize it. There's so much work to be done, and a lot of people have a high turnover. I'm not trying to be negative, but I'm just letting everybody know that there is a lot of stress. So you have to make sure that you're checking in with yourself, taking time when you can. Um, and not everything, there's things that are very important that you have to finish by like a certain time and that take priority, but not everything is of equal importance. So make sure that you sift through what's less significant or what can wait until tomorrow, because there's a ton of things that can wait until tomorrow.
Okay, that's it for my list of questions. Thank you so much for your responses, Tamara. Do you have any parting words for us today?
Sure. I would say, you know, it is really difficult to get into law school. So congratulations for anyone that has. And honestly, I know it seems like it is a very long, tedious process, but once you start law school, you literally get out of it so quickly because you're so focused on all of your assignments and deadlines. But if you just kind of stick to it and just put your best foot forward and make the best of it, it is possible, it is attainable. You just have to put in the work and rely on your support systems. But it is really rewarding as well. Just make sure you follow your passion and go into a field that you're generally interested in.
Okay, it was really nice of you to take time out of your day to tell us about your experiences. Thank you so much again. We at Pre-Law Shadowers hope to see everyone at the next session, and I'll be ending the recording shortly. So feel free to leave. But thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good day.